Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, your first question comes from Jenny in Australia. And it is about her horse who's pulling on trail and is only comfortable in the first or second position. So I've put this in the pushiness category because to me that is a horse that's sort of pulling on the reins, and pushing away from the direction that you're wanting them to be in. Not very comfortable where they are and certainly not centered. And she's just wondering if you might be able to give some advice to her. He pulls the whole way when they're out on trail. He won't keep a horse length apart from the horse in front unless she's constantly correcting him. At the rear, if he's with a buddy, he's okay for a very short time. In the middle of the group, he's horrible. It's very hard to stay relaxed and enjoy the bush when your horse wants to gallop off. Have you got any tips for her? She's tried frequent stopping, flexing, waiting, food, treats, circles, figure of eights, and she finds they all just wind him up more. It's been going on for years.
How's he ride on his own? That's all I can really ask. And there's all sorts of little tricks and remedies and things you can try out on trail, but if this is the way he's been for years, I would go through everything he knows on his own and work out how soft he is, how well he follows the rein. Does he let go of a strong forward thought when you pick up on two reins and ask him to back up? Is he confident on his own? Is he confident with you? Is he confident with the left and right? Everything. Is he confident with your legs? Can you walk, trot and canter him out on his own? Is he soft with that? Is he fine, or does he sort of feel that there's safety with other horses? Also, when you go out on trail rides, you're putting a herd horse with a different herd, and it can stress them out a lot. Sensitive horses, especially ones that are sensitive and not so comfortable with all the information that we're providing them. Now, you might say he's comfortable with me and he's okay with stuff, but even if a horse leans on the reins, they're frightened. As far as I'm concerned, they don't understand the reins, and if the reins are pulling on them all the time and they don't understand them, that creates stress. And then with that extra stress created from the rider, he's got to cope with all these new horses around him that he's only a few metres away from, and maybe in his herd he gets picked on. Maybe he's the bottom of the pecking order in his herd, and being lumped in a mob of horses is really frightening for him. It'd be like putting some sort of introvert kid who gets bullied into a full classroom of extrovert bullies. The stress would be incredible. So I can't give you an exact answer on what to do, because I would have to, analyse why the horse is like he is, not just sort of have, just like you've already tried all those things and they're not working. It's because there's a whole reason why he is like he is, and those reasons you have to go through and identify. And that's why, like I say to someone, take your horse away from the other horses, go out on your own. Just do they follow a rein nice? Are they happy with you? When you squeeze them with your legs, do they get all worried, or do they go up calmly and then they come back down calmly with the reins, or are they generally fairly stressed with all the things that we're asking them? And then if you sort of work on that, then when you go out on a trail ride, you're going to work on maybe don't get in the mosh pit too quickly. Just have that horse that you've taught to guide with your guidance and be okay with you on the outskirts a little bit, where you don't have to put him close to the intensity of all the other horses, and then just wean him into the herd and out of the herd a bit when they're riding and stuff like that, and just make him a little bit more self-sufficient and trust you. And also, if he trusts you, he knows you're not going to make him ride up the back of a horse that he doesn't know, or you're not going to sort of put him up beside a horse he doesn't know, because a horse has no control over themselves. they get stressed in the herd, because it's almost like if a horse goes to kick them, they don't know if they can move or not, because they've got a rider on them that's guiding them and pulling them all the time. Whereas in a normal situation, that horse would steer clear of a horse that gave it a snarl or something like that. So, but when they've got a rider on, they feel it, so they just get stressed and just march forward. So there's so many reasons why a horse stresses on trail, and some of it is just the inability to make their own decision when conflict between horses arises because they have a rider on them. There was a little horse that I started of ours that we bred, and it was one horse that we bred that was completely different to all the others that we've bred because she was so sensitive. And I remember when I started riding her, if I was at just a trough drinking water and one other horse came in just to have a drink, she'd shoot out of there as quick as lightning, because to cope with the stress of carrying a rider, which was quite stressful for her, and then deal with the interactions of different horses that she doesn't know, was so much intensity for her that she'd just steer clear of any ear flick, any body language, any slightest body language in another horse. She was sort of meters away from it and predicting it at every moment. I knew while I was on her, I was safe. I would never get kicked or anything because she would have read it before I even did. But it just showed me that how she was such a sensory processing mare that she had enough of a job processing me and all the sensory things that took me a long time to get her to trust, but then to process me and all the other horses and the interactions between other horses, which are new horses. That was like a really big thing for her, and I don't think we actually think about all those things enough when we just throw a horse out on trail, and there's so many things out there that can cause a horse to stress. And if 50% of the things that we're offering the horse through guidance is stressing it, then we're bound to have trouble with the horses out on trail.
Can I just ask, if you had a horse that was able to, you mentioned the reins in that, if you had a horse that was able to follow the reins quite easily, and there was no resistance there, and it seemed to be comfortable with the legs, would it be by definition easier out on trail in a group?
Well, because when a horse gets a hard thought, you can sort of say let go of that. The whole idea with the reins is you'll be able to pick up a rein and say you don't have to keep thinking about that. If the horse keeps thinking about that, then the reins don't work.
Right.
So so your rein has to override the horse's strong desire or strong anxiety, not to punish it, just to help it not have to keep worrying about it. Okay, so it's much like somebody says you've got to stop thinking about that because it's really, someone in mourning or something. You've got to get on with your life, otherwise you'll end up locked in a room full of anxiety. So if a helping hand comes along and says, come outside, we'll go for a walk, and you let go of that thought for a while, you feel better. Same with horses. The helping hand is the rein, and we're trying to say, and then that's why you have to be a clever rider when you ride horses on trail, because if you see any nasty horses, any stressed horses, any other horses that carry anxiety, you can tell your horse that I know you're worried about that, I might just steer clear of those ones. So your horse trusts you not to lead them into the mosh pit where they may get kicked. But because we don't read the other horses that well sometimes, then the horse gets stressed because, as I said before, it feels it has no control over itself if anything happens around it. So when you see, bothering a horse, another horse that carries stress, or an angry horse, or a hard expressioned horse, well, if your horse suddenly flinched a little off that horse, well, you could say, well, let's go around that horse wide a bit, and they go, oh, thanks, I was just thinking that, and you helped me with that, thank you. So then they start to trust having you driving them around other horses. But if they don't trust you driving them around other horses, they just get frantic and then just march forward, and some of them are just happy to follow other horses too. So there's the other side. I'm just only taking one side of it there. The other side of it is they're all horses and they just mob up in one herd because the humans are kind of the enemy in a sense, and they all just join up and go forward, and yours might be just joining them going forward. That's the other thing that can happen. So
But the chances are that she really needs to be able to work on her tool set at home. It's not so much a case of fixing it on trail. It's a case of reducing the horse's anxiety in the first place before they even go out.
Yep.
So that means going back to the drawing board, Jenny. Okay, the next question is from Kelly, again from Australia. She has a little Brumby Denny who's always been very pushy when food is around, whether he's on his own or with other horses. He will almost run over you to get to his feed bucket or frantically push into you in search of any food you may have in your hand. She says you recognised this in his personality early, Mark, and advised to never use treats with him, so I don't. However, currently he's with someone else looking after him, and that person is recovering from a broken ankle, so his pushiness at dinner time is a little bit of a problem. She's wondering what can they do to improve his behaviour around food for the future.
The biggest, I think, the first and initial thing is there's an order of importance in everything, and understanding that order is I think crucial. So one area of importance, as I was just talking before about the importance of the rein, letting go of a thought, getting a horse to let go of a thought, or even a lead rope on a horse. I'll give you another idea, okay? I'll put a question out for everybody. The horse is tied up on a rail, but it's got enough slack in the rope that it can move its feet a little bit if it needs to. So there's wiggle room for the horse. A plastic bag blows by. If the horse is aware of its boundaries, it'll move its feet a little bit, adjust, so it can either keep an eye on the plastic bag or move away a little bit just to feel like it's done something. But then when the rope pulls tight as it backs away from the plastic bag, what's more important, moving away from the plastic bag or moving forward to the lead rope? So in training horses, the order of importance is, I teach horses it's important that you can move away from danger and not be frozen and not desensitized. So you're allowed to move around danger, so you've got good proprioception in a horse float and around, in conflicting environments. That's something you need and it's for you. But that's really important to have that. But once that rope picks up on that rail and starts to tension, then the most important thing in the order of importance is the pressure on that rope. So you have to adjust to the pressure of that rope and figure out a way of adjusting to the pressure of the rope and still maybe moving a bit because there's a plastic bag blowing past you. But the rope is more important, and we have to teach the horse that. If we made moving away from danger more important and not the lead rope, then the horse would panic and pull back. So food is important for your horse's welfare, and so he survives and doesn't starve to death. But in the order of importance, the food is less important than the person's bubble. So you have to work out, and I don't care how important the food is to him, in his mind at that moment, that food is important. But in the order of importance, your bubble and the person's bubble is far more important, no matter what. And it's not like he's running over the person because he suddenly got a spook because there was a saber-toothed tiger just sink his teeth into his rump. It's not like he's getting away from a monster. He's going to food and he's pushing through people to do it. So to me, that's not acceptable, because if he can go to food, well, he'll push over a kid just for a piece of grass, or whatever, So basically, in the order of importance is, I don't care how important the food is, but you will not go through a person to get to it. And whatever you're thinking about that food, thinking how can you get around the person to get to it, the food will never be available until you let go of that thought. Okay, so take the food out of the situation to start with. Make sure that in any situation he knows how to move and withdraw away from a person's bubble, which means through his eyes, not through the feel of a rope. Do it through his eyes. So it could be like, I'm moving around and I'm looking over there at the fence post and I'm going to walk over there. Now, as I walk through, your nose is in the way. Can you give me space so I can walk through? So make your space quite valuable. And don't push him around and bully him like a horse pushing another horse down the pecking order or out of the herd. Just make clear lines that he has to give somebody space. And if you've got a little flag or something with you, as he gets to the point that your bubbles touch, know your bubble, know the size that you want to make, maybe a metre around you, from you being the centre and a metre out. so that'll be a 2 metre diameter, I suppose. You got this bubble around you, and he doesn't come into that bubble when he's anxious, okay? When you guys look at each other and make contact, that's different. That's like walking up to somebody and shaking their hand. But when I'm walking through the supermarket, I'm not bumping into everyone that I see. I'm walking around them, and we understand bubbles. It's only when I go and shake someone's hand that we actually agree to put our bubbles down, or our boundaries down. So basically, make sure he's super aware of that bubble until he doesn't get it wrong. So it's not, you don't practice until you get it right. You practice till you don't get it wrong. So you keep doing that every day, that he knows where that spot is, and he can give that spot space and stand quietly through his eyes. So, as I say, if you're walking a straight line towards a post and he's in the way, at that point where the bubbles touch, you shake the flag till he steps back. Allow him to create the space. Don't. You're not going to go into his space. You stand still while he steps out of it, and then you continue walking to the post until you can walk wherever you want. And if you suddenly turned and cut across his path, he softens, he backs off, and allows you to make your path, because your path becomes more important. Now, it's essential in horses, because they're such big animals around somewhat little people sometimes, that they become super aware that they can give us space. They don't take our space. And you don't have to make them feel bad about us and still have that arrangement. They're okay with it as long as we don't use it to bully them. As long as we're using it for a real purpose, to go places and not push them around, then they're completely fine with it. So make sure that you've got that well established, and then put a bucket of feed beside you, and he can stare at that bucket, and you'll have a flag in your hand, and every time he sees thoughts going to the bucket and sort of pushing like he's going to push through that bubble, I do something with the flag until he lets go of the thought and softens. And when he softens and stands, then I might think about teaching him to lead up to food. So something I did with a horse a while ago at a clinic that had the same, but it got really aggressive, and it would actually want to take people out to get to its food. Is I didn't just teach the owner how to teach the horse how to not have food and not push us. I taught the horse how to walk to food softly. So I didn't actually say, this is what you can't do. I said, this is what you can do. Mm-hmm. So we worked on the horse being able to move away from a person without looking like it was, looking like it had a really, really angry face when even if you said, can you just step back from me? But when it started to move back off us softly and be comfortable with that, then we brought out the food, and the first thing it had to do was let go of the food in its mind and just start to soften. Once it could stand still away from the food, 5 or 10 metres away, or between 5 and 10 metres away from the food, and not fixate on the food and get angry at us for being in the way of the food, then I taught it how to lead one step at a time up to the food until we led it up to the food and let it eat with a soft thought. So it had to walk all the way up to the food softly and then engage with the food softly. And that was our aim, to say, this is how you relax around food, because this horse got so stressed around food that became a habit. So we didn't want to just say, don't push us. We wanted to say, don't be stressed around food. Now, with your horse, it may not be the same, but there's still an element of that. Teach him how to approach food softly. The softer he approaches food, the more the food's going to be likely. The harder he approaches it, the less likely the food's going to be available. And teach them to be soft around food. And this other horse, I mean, it was like that around other horses. So when we got the horse to come to the food softly, we actually got two horses to eat out of the same bucket at the same time and accept each other, because they were in a soft mindset, and that was sort of continuing until the horses actually did something well, not just didn't do something. So that's another thing you want to think about with him.
Fascinating. The last question for today, Mark, is from M in Australia as well. She has a hypothetical question. It's a really good question, this one. She says, you get given a horse with no background information other than it's possibly broken in. What is your process to figure out what it knows? do you treat it as if it's unbroken?
I was going to come up with a funny idea then. It's just you find out some sort of crazy friend that you've got and you say, I've bought this broken in horse, can you just give it a ride for me because I've got a sore ankle? And if your friend gets bucked off, you know that it's not ready to be ridden.
Yes, I think you know, you've been asked that a few times.
I remember being the crash test dummy a few times saying, I've broken in, it probably just hasn't been ridden for a while, and I was silly enough to get on them. But no, how like there's... Basically, I think you've probably seen me at clinics where I've sort of approached horses in certain ways just to find out what they do and don't understand, what causes anxiety, and there's a whole list of things you can do. One of the first things I sort of tend to do is if I just walk up to the horse normally, is it really frightened of energy? Is it and you do an energy test on it. And now why you do an energy test is because some horses are frightened of new people, but they're frightened of energy in general. Some horses are frightened of energy because they've been driven and chased a lot, and I want to identify those things, because if they were horses that were broken in, like a station horse, those station horses, they get broken in, but they can have 12 months off, come back in and bronc until they've had their first week of work, and then do another 12 months of work. But still, after 12 months off, they'll be horses that are tense and bronc because they're only flooded until they subsided or resided to the fact. But the anxiety was always in them. So when they're full of feed and they've had all this time off, they go back about the same things that happened when they were bucked out when they first got broken in. So this is the risk: is some horses seem like they haven't ever been broken in because they've had 1 or 2 years off, but they were broken in and worked in a way that just made them subdue, but they just held all the anxiety inside them. So they're the ones that you got to watch out for, because they can be quite explosive. But it's a hard one to answer, because I work out, can they lead, can they walk past me, can they trust me on each eye, if I trot them up on lead, do they get stressed, how frightened of me are they? That's the first things I work out. And then I put a belly rope on them and test them, and if I just girth them up normally, do they suddenly get all brittle? Obviously I'm careful with it because I don't want to suddenly go but there's things that you can test, and usually you test it in your leading, and then you just do random things like stand on a mounting block and lead them by, and if they're sort of really looking at you funny, or they're looking at you funny from the back end, you know that, well, I'm going to have to treat them like a fresh starter, because I'm not going to get on a horse that doesn't know these things, even though some other cowboy might have rode it years ago and rode the bucks out of it. I don't want to go through all this stuff. So yeah, some of them that are really nervous and have had a bad start, it is a potential restart, because you go through all the things and find the holes that haven't been done or haven't been addressed. But if the horse looks like its eyes and ears are moving, and it's sort of breathing, and it's kind of processing, and it's trusting you, and when you stand up beside it or on a fence, or it looks quiet, you start to know, well, actually this horse is coping in a way that probably had a rider on it, and it's been pretty soft about it. But it's basically look for trust. If the horse doesn't trust the certain things that seem close to riding, the girthing part of it, the leading up, the part going past the eyes, stepping on a mounting block or a rail, all those things. If they look frozen and obedient, I wouldn't get on them. I'd treat them as a starter until they open up, because those horses, they may be a horse that has been ridden and just been an obedient frozen horse that's done nothing wrong, and may not do anything wrong. But the problem with those frozen horses, you can't read it either way. You're reading this kind of expression that's not really telling you how they feel about every moment. So though someone might say, yeah, good on you, that horse is fine, it's had that many kids on it, I still see one of those horses and go, yeah, but because that horse is not communicating it, I could just get on it and it just could just bronc and go to town, because it's not communicating, because it's kind of in a shutdown. So no matter how many people say that horse is a quiet horse, if it looks shut down to me and I haven't seen someone else ride it and it's only hearsay, I would take it as, I want to find out more about this horse, because maybe it is just a shut down horse, but it's just frozen.
Tell us a story about that horse that reared on you.
Oh, years ago, yeah. That was I used to, obviously when you're working, I've always been self-employed, but I'd be taking on horses to start, and then a fella rang me up one day. Oh, this horse, it hasn't been ridden for 12 months, but I broke in. It was going good. Can you just come over and give it a ride for me? And so anyway, I drove over to his cattle yards, and I'm thinking, rocky cattle yards, that's not great, is it? With a few rocks around in them and stuff like that. But anyway, I sort of saddled the horse up, and I kind of loosened it up a little bit, and then, it feels okay. It should be all right. And then I sat on it, and obviously in the country, when you're dealing with, people, they're not going to want you to come over for 5 hours and do a full, they just got an hour. Can you ride this horse for me? And otherwise they're not even going to call you up, sort of thing. So I went over and I picked up the left rein, and I was just bending it a bit to see if I could see its eye, and just so I can get the eye on both sides. It was only a tiny little bit I was picking up on the rein, and within a microsecond, and I can read a horse pretty well when it rears, but this horse, I could feel it was a bit twitchy, as they do, but I got left rein. I said it's a bit twitchy, and then in a microsecond, it just flicked and reared over backwards, and it was that quick that it wasn't one of those, if you keep pulling, I'm gonna hop, and it wasn't a build up to a weir. It was just like a pop, like just out of the blue, and hindsight's hindsight. Looking back at it, the horse was still a bit frozen. I just stepped on it, and all I wanted to do was get an eye so I could start to loosen it up and get it to follow the rein a bit and soften. But out of the freeze response, as soon as it just ripped its head away from the rein and flipped over in a second, and then next minute the saddle's on my back, and I climbed up on the fence going, oh, that wasn't a good one. And that was just, getting on and thinking, oh, yeah, he broke it in, she'll be right. It'll be a bit green, but...
Hang on a minute, the horse reared over backwards on top of you, and the next minute you're climbing up the fence going, that wasn't a good one. How do you do it? You've had a dodgy hip since that moment. So, no matter what you're doing with all these horses that you don't know about, please be careful. Don't end up like Mark with a dodgy hip for the rest of your life for $35. It's not worth it.
But in saying that, I did in the next half hour I was cantering the horse down the paddock and riding it around, and it went okay.
Yes, so it was a freak. It was a freak moment.
It was one freak rear, and then once we got through it, I rode the horse, and probably the best thing I did was get back on it and loosen the hip up. Otherwise, it would have been more frozen.
Anyway, best of luck and take care. As to all of you out there listening, I hope that no horse ever rears over backwards on any of you. That's great listening for your advice again, Mark. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like it, share it, or leave us a comment. It all helps in reaching new ears and helping more horses. Learn more of Mark Langley's unique insights and how you can positively affect your horse's training ability and mental welfare. For just the price of a couple of coffees, you can access his online horsemanship training videos. Head to marklangley.com.au. We look forward to helping you.